Our presentation today will be about unemployment in MENA region. Let me first mention the fact that, as already mentioned clearly, that food security is also about food accessibility. And for MENA region, for a sustainable food security strategy, unemployment may be a real constraint. So we need really to think if addressing unemployment in the region, particularly among youth, is also a food security policy. So I will start first by some results that we got, some observation. Very recently we got access to the employment surveys in Tunisia, Jordan and Egypt. And what we can observe is that unemployment among youth is really high. It's not compared to others, of course, but what makes MENA region so different from other countries, because we know that unemployment among youth is also high in other countries in the world, like Spain and South Africa and many other countries. But what makes MENA region different is that youth unemployment is really persistent. That means that there is something structural behind. It's not really related to bad economic performance, but it is related to some structural issues that we need really to figure out. The other thing which makes MENA somewhat different from other regions in the world is that youth unemployment among educated people is really very high. And that we can ask the main question why we have some problem. Is it related to the fact that maybe performance of education system is not really good enough? This is the question that we try really to ask. So if you can move. This is maybe the main, what I mentioned, it is somewhat general for the MENA region, the fact that unemployment among youth is really high and that the more educated people are, the more concerned by unemployment. But there is some difference, there is some particularity at the country level. The first thing that if we compare, for example, Egypt, Jordan to Morocco and Tunisia, we can see that the gap between youth unemployment among female and male is different. That the gap is really important in Egypt and Jordan, while for Tunisia and Morocco the gap is narrow. And this is maybe the first difference. There is many differences, but we focus only on the main differences between the country. The other thing that we should mention, that when young people are asked if they are ready really to accept a job in the 7 days. For example, in Tunisia, we observed that about 90% say yes, while we get different results for countries like Egypt and Jordan. And this means that maybe the pressure to find a job vary across country, and we maybe can give an idea about the fact that in Tunisia, youth are more optimistic about job opportunity compared to Jordan and Egypt. So what is the key message? The key message is, even if youth unemployment is really a regional problem, but solution cannot really be at the regional level. We need really a country-specific solution. In other words, any approach that do not really consider the structural institution at the country level may not really be appropriate to address the problem of youth in the region. For that reason, we will focus on Tunisia as a case study. So what we can get from the data, we will focus on two really important observations that will lead to very interesting questions. The first observation, as the region in general is youth unemployment is really high, but the most unemployment, that's mean in terms of numbers, the majority of youth have a low education. But it is clear for Tunisia that unemployment rate is increasing with education. That means we have higher unemployment rate for tertiary educated youth. So the idea is that the expanding schooling may not really be a real solution to address youth unemployment. It's a policy that has been implemented for a long period in Tunisia. So the main question that we want really to ask, why wages do not really fall to reduce unemployment? Is there any problem? Is there any friction on the labor market that really constrain the labor market to equilibrate supply and demand? The second observation that we get from the survey is that as many MENA countries, Tunisia, the majority of the social and economic activity in Tunisia is concentrated on the coastal area. And we have a wide regional variation in economic development and in employment. So we can really think Tunisia as a coastal area and an inland area, what we call core and periphery. And what we observe is that unemployment rate among youth is much more higher in the periphery than in the coastal area. And the male-female differentiation is less in the periphery. That means there is less discrimination or gender discrimination in the core area. So the question, if we have, even about wages, we have higher wages in the core area than the periphery. So we have more, maybe more, or relatively more job opportunity in the core area. We have better employment conditions, and we have higher wages. So the question that we want really to ask is why young people do not really move from the periphery to the core. And we will try to answer both questions. So the first remark is that the data show that there is no problem of vacancies. That means there is some dynamics in the economy, and the economy succeeds to create more and more jobs. But the problem is that we think that the main issue, the main constraint is that reservation wages for youth is too high. That means young people are too expensive for firms, considering, of course, their skills and lack of experience. And this is maybe the main issue that may not really make employment of youth affordable for firms, especially particularly for small firms. So from the demand side, the main explanation is that firms really care more about skills and experience. And it is quite clear that employers do not really consider schooling as a reliable signal of capabilities. And so they look more to more experienced and more skilled really people rather than more educated people. This is the first argument. From the supply side, what we can see is that we suspect that maybe you do not really accept to lower the wage, this reservation wage, which is considered as high. The main argument is that we compare, for example, the public sector wage and the private sector wage. We see that there is a large gap between the two sectors. And the main explanation for the fact that youth do not really accept really to lower the wage is the fact that they have the wage is somewhat biased by the public sector. And they set their reference to the public sector, so for that reason we have a very high reservation wage. And the other thing is that family provide a strong really fallback position for that. The data show that about 85% of unemployed youth rely on their family. So they have a financial support from their family. This may make them somewhat reluctant really to accept a lower wage. So the second question that we want really to answer is why young people do not really move, or why we have a problem of geographical flexibility. So we think that for Tunisia, there is no problem of discrimination. We have not really any problem of language barriers. We have enough jobs. Employment conditions are much more better in the core area. And there is no really problem of skills between the periphery and the core. That means there is no really any barriers for youth really to access the labor market in the core area. So from this perspective, we see that there is no really any structural constraint that really make the youth really constrained to move to the core area. So the main explanation, of course, as the Arab society in general and in many Arabic countries, that we have women is still constrained really to change the place of residence. It's not really widely accepted for the Arab societies that, for example, women leave the place of residence and go to other regions really to look for better job opportunities, something that is really what we call cultural preference that we cannot really do anything about, something that may be disappear with modernization, but this is the fact. But we have still a problem of geographical flexibility for women. I should really mention that the size of Tunisia is really small. So this means that there is some other factors that explain this problem of lack of mobility. One explanation is that the existing framework that is supposed really to provide information about job opportunity in the country is not really efficient enough. That there is something to be done from the side that's improve information. That information do not really provide it in the right time and the right place for young. So from the data we can show that about 80% of youth rely on themselves really to find a job and not really on the official channels. The other thing is that even in the periphery, we have a family fallback for young. That means fallback position for young. That means even in the where the level of GDP is much more lower, families still continue really to support financially their children. And this may explain somewhat why youth do not really move to the periphery. In addition, of course, to the standard reason, which is really the high migration costs. So what can be done to address this problem? Of course, as we mentioned, we have a problem of reservation wage, which is really too high. And the other problem, we have a lack of mobility. So we will focus on the two problems, how we can really reduce this gap between what we call the reservation wage and the real productivity or the effective productivity of youth. Because we consider that the gap between the productivity and this first entry wage is the main constraint for youth employment. So the current policy, which has been implemented in 2011, consists to give some financial support to university graduates. So it targeted really graduates. It's not really, does not really concern our young people, but just graduates. We think that this policy may be a good policy or may be good welfare policy, but for sure it is not really a good employment policy, because it may really make young people more reluctant really to accept a new job opportunity. And this may be, this financial support may be politically correct, but economically we think that it's not really efficient enough, at least at the long run. And it's really costly. That's how this is the main issue. What we propose is a wage subsidy that help really to reduce the gap between this reservation wage and the productivity or lack of experience. That is what we call a financial support to cover the risk really to employ someone who we do not really know exactly his productivity. And this may encourage really firms really to employ more and more young people. So concerning the regional mobility, of course, okay, I will finish. So for the regional mobility, what we propose is really to subsidize youth mobility. That means to give some financial support for housing and transport for young people. This may really improve geographical flexibility of young people. So to conclude, we should really remind you that it is not really about young people, it's really a general problem. That means even adults are concerned by unemployment. And what we need is really to rethink our development strategy. We need really a growth model with a high absorptive capacity for unemployment. This is what we should really focus on, even if youth unemployment is really a huge challenge for the region. Thank you very much.